Gang. Hello. So,
Hello there.
anyways, hey guys, welcome to the report. So today, we have a New Year's special of sorts. We decided to do something simpler today, and not go through some long process of article or a would-be thing in the games industry. Yesterday we kind of did that, or last week we kind of did that. This week we're really going to do that. Consider it a more relaxed episode, considering the New Year is literally on the weekend. So,
Yes.
yeah, there's that. So, what are we going to talk about? Well, recently I decided to give myself a gift this Christmas, and decided to actually buy PlayStation Plus Premium. For those who don't know, basically there was a thing back in the day where PlayStation had both PlayStation Plus, which was basically their multiplayer they were selling separately alongside a few other gizmos like cloud saving and a bunch of other stuff, as well as, excuse me,
Croft?
PlayStation. What was it even called back then? I can't remember what it was, but basically it was a side thing that PlayStation had. Basically, kind of like Xbox's Xbox. There's Xbox Live, and then there's Xbox, that other thing that Xbox
Croft,
has.
wait up.
Oh my gosh, what is it? Their streaming service. I can't remember what it's called. You remember what it is, Justin?
For what, the Xbox?
Yeah, what they call their streaming
You going?
service.
I think... I want to say Xbox Live, but no. I'm pretty sure it's something simple, like, it's like either Xbox, like a certain Xbox Live, or it's Xbox Plus or something like that.
Let's just look this up real quickly. Xbox streaming. Game Pass, that's it. So it was similar to Xbox Game Pass and how it was treated separately. However, I guess they couldn't sell it independently because everyone who was on PlayStation was just sinking money into PlayStation Plus only. So they didn't want to buy two different things and keep renewing two different things separately. So they're like, you know what we'll do? We'll just mash them together and make a tier system. So what they did is they basically took their basic PlayStation Plus, which, like I said, was basically you've got your base edition, which has everything the original one did, which is cloud saving, multiplayer access. Yes, nowadays you need to pay for multiplayer. That was the thing that came a long time ago back in the PlayStation 4 era when that first came out. That was a debate. Didn't really go anywhere though.
In the Force.
I've been working quite a few days recently. But anyways, so then they have the middle tier, and this is kind of a bit of their streaming service they've thrown in. So you get everything of the base version, plus the kind of more modern library of games. So basically, you get access to their streaming catalog of modern games. So I believe Assassin's Creed Valhalla is on there. I believe some of the no, I don't think the Fallouts are out there. Those are older ones. But I know that I believe Death Stranding is on there. A few of the quite a few of the modern games. So basically, a good chunk of the games library are more modern games from the PS5 era, and I believe PS4 era are on there. PS4? I think it's from the PS4 era. Regardless, and then you have the premium set, which is the highest tier thing. This is like $100 just to get this, and you get it for a year, and it has, excuse me, all the things that come with the base version, the middle tier, which we discussed is the modern collection of streaming service games, but it also has their classics catalog. So this includes things from PS3 year, PS2 year, I believe. There's nothing from the PS1 yet there.
Failure to turn over this traitor?
But yeah, it's got a lot of things from the old PS3, PS2 era.
Turn yourself in, or everyone present.
So yeah, now you're probably wondering, what about backwards compatibility? I'm just going to toss this on the side above this all. Because if you're like me, you've been playing the games since the PS2 era at least. So you have a massive collection of these games from the PS2 era at least. And you're probably thinking, why can't I just backwards compatibility? Well, you'd be right. For those who don't remember, allow me to refresh your memory. Before the PS5 and Series X came out, there was, way back in like almost the end of the Xbox 4 or Xbox One and PlayStation 4's life cycle, there was a theory going around, and it was getting steam that PlayStation was, or there was something of a theory dash rumor going around, that PlayStation was working on a console for the next generation that would be backwards compatible all the way back to the first generation. And this made people very happy because, again, at this point, backwards compatibility in consoles, at least among the PlayStations and Xboxes, wasn't really a thing.
We're all just expendable.
I mean, it kind of was a thing, I believe, for Xbox for a little bit, but that kind of phased out.
No!
And maybe PS3 attempted it, but I don't think so.
Look at this. A lightsaber.
But it was never a long-standing feature, right? Nintendo had been doing it every once in a while, surprisingly. They were actually the first ones, I believe, who attempted it back with the Wii, if memory serves, where you could actually use your Wii to play GameCube games as well. And it was actually a port to plug in GameCube controllers. Which, if you ask me, is probably what lended to its longevity for so long. In fact, I think it was only 2-3 years ago they actually stopped producing them back in Japan. So, what does that tell you? Regardless, but then again, Nintendo's always done their own thing, so they've never really concerned themselves with the goings-on of the modern industry. So, back to the PlayStation and Series X. If you've been keeping track of things, that rumor didn't turn out to be true, or at least not in the way we thought. There was indeed a console designed to go to the backwards compatibility, which basically means you can play all the games from your old archive back to the first generation. But it wasn't PlayStation, it was actually Xbox who did it. So Xbox's Series can actually play Xbox 360 games, and I believe Xbox just base games as well. Though when it comes to Xbox 360 and Xbox 360 games, most of them are backwards compatible, and 99% of it, and I think when it comes to anything older than that, it's a bit of a finicky, but still, it can.
Gotta keep moving.
PlayStation did, however, fulfill their somewhat rumor and make it backwards compatible, the PlayStation 5 that is, but only to the PlayStation 4. This is still good news, considering that, like I said before this, there had never really been any backwards compatibility in the industry. Once a new system came out, all that game series system played was that generation, and that was it. Your old archive is now garbage. At the very least, now nothing more than collecting dust, unless you want to bust out the old console and play it there. You can't play with the new generation. Which, again, was something of a handicap, because people had to build up their libraries again. Now, you can go into the reasons as to why they decided to do it this generation compared to all the others. You could argue that COVID being a slow launch, causing the consoles to, not being able to be produced as much, which meant that they had very little stock at first, meaning there wasn't many to go around. That affected the games industry as well, because there weren't as many games being made, yada yada yada. You could argue that them doing this was just a way to kind of circumvent the idea that people wouldn't have much of a game's library to choose from in the beginning. All consoles really don't, but this would be even worse than usual. So this could be a way to kind of rectify that by giving people their old library back. You could argue that, you could argue a few other things, but generally speaking, that's the shtick. So, now that I've basically talked your ear off about backwards compatibility, you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with streaming services? Well, let me explain. Basically, PlayStation, like I said, only backwards compatible back to the PS4, which again, still good, but means all your PS3, PS2, and if you've been around that long, PS1 games are still defunct on the system. So, how are you going to play anything from PlayStation 3 and backward? Well, they decided to make their Classics catalog, which is basically all their games on their streaming service that you can just use on the thing. And again, you don't have to pay for any of these games once you have the service. You can just say, like, I've been playing Dark Void recently, which is an old PS3 game, I believe. And this is, I think, one of the...
I think so.
Wouldn't... I'm surprised you know. But anyways.
Get to the front. Stop the train.
I decided to replay it because it was one of the first games I had for PS3. I think it was like one of the three games I was gifted from Christmas alongside my PS3, actually.
Gotta move in between bursts.
Yeah, no, it was. It was that one and
Now.
Dragon Game. I think, yeah, no, it was Infamous, a Dragon Game, and Dark Void. Those were the first three games for my PS3 I was gifted for Christmas alongside my PS3. I became a major Infamous fan. By the way, Infamous is also on the streaming service. And Infamous 2. I digress. So,
Faster.
here's the skinny. They decided to put
I'm ready for your
Dark Void on the streaming service. And I'm going, cool. I haven't played PS3 in so long, like literally years. I want to replay it.
Got the coupling out.
So I played it, and I am playing it. And now I'm going to tell you my experiences
down.
about the streaming services.
Ah!
First off, word of caution if you're invested in it. When you stream a game through their streaming services, none of the DLC is included. First off. Or at least not exterior things. So let's say you play, I don't know, Infamous 2. Anyone who knows Infamous 2 also knows that there was a DLC for it called Festival of Blood. Basically, main Terragus gets infected by a vampire, and there's a whole summary plot that comes out of that. There's a whole mini series of missions that comes from that. If you buy Infamous, or if you play Infamous 2 through the streaming services, you will get Infamous 2 and all the stuff that came with it, but not that expansion, because that's part of a DLC pack that came later. By the sounds of it, how they're treating it is they're treating each game independently, and they're kind of just booting them up as needed. So any external DLC that came with the games is not included. I actually read this up myself, and I actually learned about that, and I am seeing that of it myself, so be cautious if you do play it.
Only way is up.
Interestingly enough, Festival of Blood is also on the streaming services as a separate thing to stream, but, you know, whatever. It's a whole self-contained plotline, so I suppose it makes sense.
Yep.
Regardless, so how are my opinions of this particular streaming services? Well, when I first booted it up, it worked rather well. But I do notice that there is occasionally audio clipping. In that regards to, like, at least when I first booted up, the audio was a bit, like, clipping in and out every few minutes, or every few seconds. It eventually subsided, and I haven't seen that anymore. To kind of paraphrase one of the pieces I wrote, or kind of not wrote, read, about the topic, basically your streaming service, like, ability, or, like, your quality will range from very good to playable at best. Or playable at worst, I mean. So at best you'll have a very great game. At worst you'll have it's playable. And it will really depend on the case-per-case basis as well as your own network connection. Like sometimes in Dark Void, the resolution will slowly take a nosedive. So it'll start becoming very grainy in a bit. So it's like I'm shooting I'm shooting at enemies, but they're all like geometric shapes. They're not like fine outlines. They're just like
They're just solid blocks.
Not solid blocks, but they're just kind of like bladed with the background. So it's like I think this thing is the enemy because it looks different from the grass. You stand still for a minute, that does subside, but again, it really will depend on the game and the streaming and your own network connection. Overall, it's not a bad streaming service. Originally, funny enough, I wasn't actually going to play it originally to play Dark Void. My original plan was to play the Sly Cooper collection and the Sly Cooper sequel that came out, Thieves in Time, which are both on the streaming service. Now, this is kind of like I said, where I have to touch back on that point where in the streaming service, there is no, like, DLC for that streaming service outside of what's inside the base package. So if you're going to stream a game, preferably you're going to want to look for, you know, collector's editions or, you know, collections of the games. For example, they don't have the original Sly Cooper 1, 2, and 3 on the streaming service. They have the Sly Cooper Collection, which has 1, 2, and 3 on it. As well as, I think, a little bit of remastering work done. So if you're going to look for that, they're probably more likely to find your, you know, look for a collection or a legendary edition. Kind of like what Mass Effect did with their legendary edition. That game has baked into it all the DLC from over the years. So you don't need to go rummaging through the libraries of, ancient, storefronts or something like that to look for downloading it separately. It's all contained in there by itself. You don't need to buy anything extra for the game. That's kind of what you're looking at with the streaming service. Overall, I like it. I will most likely play Sly Cooper at some point. I'm desperate to. I've just yet to decide which one I'm going to play first. Am I just going to replay the whole series, or am I just going to skip to Thieves in Time? I don't know. I'm still thinking of that one. Regardless, overall, it's good. However, you're not just here to hear about the PlayStation streaming service as a whole. What about other streaming services in general? Well, let's open it up to less from what I know and more about what I would think is happening. Like, just what is your opinion on when it comes to streaming services?
Who's your master, Padawan? Someone I killed, perhaps? What Jedi gave their life so that you might live?
First, I thought he was dead.
Then he was gone.
And then he was gone. That's all he has to say. Very useful. Very informative.
Yes.
Clearly he's not doing any infomercials. But regardless, I mean, what do you think about the whole idea of them? Like, do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? Like, what's your thoughts on them?
I think streaming services and all that is good, but I don't know. It's interesting because at the end of the day, you're always going to have primarily a bit of a lag when it comes to using them, and you're always going to have delays primarily in sound, because I don't know what it is with the sound when it comes to streaming services, but a lot of the time it tends to bug out a lot for people. So yeah, I don't know. Streaming services are very good and useful on more than one way, but yeah, I don't really know what to say because I don't really use them very much.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Didn't know if you would have any other opinions on them. That's
Not really. I mean, for the most part, it's useful. It's just it's got a little bit more to go when it comes to actually making them work nicely, because a lot of the time it tends to end up very poorly for a lot of people.
That's the thing. It really seems to be like the next gold rush in gaming. Like, the whole Netflix for gaming has been an idea bounced around since, I think, even before the PS3, or even before the PS5 came out, or the next generation of consoles in general came out. Like, the idea of creating this streaming service has certainly been an idea bounced around before. I mean, what was kind of like the first thing to get it? I think Stadia was actually the first people to attempt. No, PlayStation and their thing, along with Xbox, was like the first kind of streaming shtick to do it. But earlier days, like, they've had, I think, close to a decade to figure it out, so...
Yeah.
Stadia was, I think, the biggest name to come into the industry when it came to, like, outside influence to try and do it, and... For those who don't know, they crashed and burned. I think Stadia was just kind of a result of Google's philosophy in general, which is they think they're so powerful, so rich, and so
Brute forcing it all.
Yeah, like,
work.
I think I once heard someone tell me, like, a friend of mine, he once said to me, Google is so... Like, Google's philosophy is that they're so big and so powerful that when it comes to new ideas, they just throw money onto the board. They just throw like, they're so rich they can afford the things to fail. So I think I once had, like I said, maybe a friend or something I read before told me that basically what they'll do is they'll throw projects onto the board and they'll just see what sticks. They really don't care if it fails or not because they're so powerful that at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if they fail. It's a drop in the bucket profitability-wise.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of how it would go for them. Just so meaningless in the cost.
And that's the thing, right? That's what everyone kind of thought Stadia would end up like eventually, which it did. It's this idea that Google, yeah, at the onset of it, seemed like a good idea. Google is such a powerful company with so many servers all over the place because they're basically the backbone of the internet,
Who are you people?
or at the very least one of the most
My
predominant,
name is Surjunda,
Bones.
and this is my captain.
yeah, one of the
Mr.
stronger
Jones.
bones out there, considering their search engine is probably one of the most used.
So,
That,
who are you?
Cal.
you know, they have so many servers all over the place that they could theoretically use those servers also for
Imperial
streaming.
Inquisitor. She's a Force user hunting Jedi
But
survivors.
the problem wasn't in the initial idea. The initial idea was good. It was on the execution
How
of
do you
it.
know so much?
The problem with Stadia is that, yeah, they have the architecture for it, they have the design for it, they just don't have the knowledge and the
What's the
connections to do it. Because here's the thing. You can't just walk into the games industry and say, I'm going to host a streaming service. You could do that with a game. I'm going to make a game.
Yeah,
But
like
even then,
you
what you're doing.
can try to walk in, but developers, studios, like they're not gonna just give you their game to stream unless you give them a good reason.
Yeah.
Like what?
Like, the only really ones they were able to nag is games that are already free to play in general. So things like Destiny, things like Fortnite, things like that, which don't have any upfront cost to playing anyway. So what does it matter if they're on another streaming
Jedi
service?
Council?
Those games make their money through exterior means.
They're gone.
But any game like, for example, I don't know, let's go with one of the more popular ones.
So I'm all you've got.
Let's say, I don't think they did, but let's say Fallout. Any of the Fallout games. They weren't there, I don't believe. Because that required upfront costs. Or any of the most modern games.
In the meantime,
Yeah, any games that they did get would have had to have been through a massive payment.
Yeah, no, there was negotiations there that you would have to connect, and not everyone's willing to negotiate with a company that, for all intents and purposes, really knows nothing about the games industry.
Yep.
So they were basically
it's a-
nailed.
Yeah, it's like it's a very rocky start. Like at the end of the day, they're not really gonna get much done with it when there's so little people who are willing at the time to even try such an adventure.
And the thing also is, you have to remember, that philosophy with Google, like I said, they just stick things to the board and they don't care if they fall down. They aren't going to try and, like, save them. That's just an experiment for them. So at the end of the day, people were also concerned that, like, not only do they not have the knowledge or the resources, or not the knowledge of the connections, they don't have the will to keep a project going longer than it looks borderish profitable. Once it kind of goes beyond, we tried, they'll just discontinue it and move to the next thing. Granted, they stuck around a little bit longer than people were hoping, but at the end of the day, they did kind of fall down with the rest.
Not now. I got work to do.
But that did kind of open the door to people trying their own shtick for streaming service with games. Like I said, the big console creators are the ones doing it now. I think Xbox is working on their xCloud. I have no idea where that is in terms of development cycle. But currently they have their Game Pass, which is less of a streaming service for games and more of just like a library of you buy in and you can access any of them. It's less of a streaming service.
Yeah, it's more of just you gain the ability to play any game that's available on it so long as you pay you keep paying into the service kind of thing.
Yeah.
An object and witness events connected to.
So now that I think about it, outside of PlayStation, I can't really think of any other real game streamers off the top of my head. I mean, like I said, Stadia tried and failed. I don't think Amazon tried. They tried to break into the industry, but I don't think they tried streaming stuff.
No, I think
They were
Amazon tried something streaming related, or at least there were talks about it, but I haven't heard anything about it really.
Jared Hall. He was a true guardian of the
But that's the thing, right? It's this idea that everyone wants to try and figure out, but no one really has either the architecture or the connections to do.
Listen,
Like, when it comes to PlayStation, they might not have the massive architecture that Apple or Google does, But they have a
My
library,
connection to
and
the
they
Force
have
is damaged.
pre-established contracts with games
When I
going
meditate,
back
I
several
let my guard down.
decades.
I lose control.
So they could easily
It's like I'm
leverage
back in
those
that moment
contracts
when
to be like, hey, put
You
your stuff on our
survived
streaming service, and
now.
that would be that. They wouldn't have to really renegotiate anything.
And you're not alone. Not anymore.
I mean, sure, they probably are paying some level of perhaps licensing fee,
Definitely.
considering the streaming service is maybe what, 100-something bucks a year per person.
I can't
And
really
who knows?
confirm on the price with that one though.
Yeah, I'll have to look that one up again, but
Yeah.
it's at least $100 per
This
person.
is begun.
So,
A Jedi I knew discovered it before the purge.
if not more. So,
You won't find it on any map.
it is not a
The
cheap
Empire doesn't know
price,
this
or at the
place
very
exists.
least, it is not,
So, what's the plan?
a small price comparative to a
Hide out
game.
here?
Granted, like I said, you are getting
We're
a
done
massive
hiding.
library out
Like,
of that. but-
Yeah, you're with
See
the
that
amount of
structure?
games and stuff you're getting out of it,
I
you're
believe
getting
that
a fairly
platform is the key
good
to
sized
building the Jedi
chunk
Order.
Yeah.
that would
But
otherwise
it
probably
requires someone
cost you a
strong
fair
enough
amount,
to pass its
but
test.
Yeah.
Since you're
still.
not a Jedi anymore, that's
There
why
are
you need
issues
me.
that come with the streaming
I know
service.
you don't
Like I
trust
said,
me.
there are
And
network
I'm not
issues,
really
obviously.
Sure I trust you.
There are,
But we
like I
have
said,
a
that will
common
depend on just how
enemy
good your connection
and a
is.
common cause.
There are
Share
issues
Well,
that
it's-
exist in
it-
streaming that would just never
like
exist.
there's also going to be the
So then,
primary thing, which is
someone here I
how
can
fast
trust.
upload can be sent and
May
received
the Force be
in
with
the
you.
first place.
Yeah,
Like there
yeah.
is a logistical cap right now on how much you can really go. And although people are working to go and improve that with like different things like going from landlines and stuff like that to fiber, I think it was fiber cables. What was it exactly?
Fiber optics, something like that.
Fiber optics. Like people are trying to make improvements, but that's gonna take time. Like we're still a little ways off with some of that stuff.
And even then, like, yeah, there are issues in the streaming space that just would never exist in a physical disc version. Like, again, one of the critiques that I've read about and have experienced is that sometimes button inputs just won't register, like every once in a blue moon. And every once in a while, you might find yourself walking off a cliff. And so, in a game for streaming service, like, would I recommend you play something like Elden Ring or Dark Souls on a streaming service? No. No. Because,
You
like, if you want to give yourself a challenge, sure, but that's less of a challenge and more of a lottery at that point, because
Yeah.
you might die just due sheer dumb luck.
Yeah, no, like when it comes to a lot of streaming service games, you're better off with games that are more relaxed and you don't have to press 100 buttons every 5 seconds.
So, in a way, my plan of playing Dark Void, which for those who don't know, is a game based around you flying around as a jetpack and having a lot of aerial sections and dogfight sections and a lot of precise controls in some ways, or at least as precise as PlayStation 3 would go. It's proved interesting. I've crashed on more than one occasion. And it has been slightly frustrating. Still a very fun game, but, in retrospect, that was probably a bad idea. So we'll see how well Sly Cooper goes for me, which is admittedly a lot less precise of a game.
Yeah.
But
you just have to mess around with it, see how it goes.
yeah. But again, all in all, streaming services are an interesting idea. There is a lot of promise for them. Like I said, the whole success of things like Netflix really showed that the whole idea of streaming services
Well,
are
yeah,
actually
like
a really good idea.
yeah,
if you
like
can do them right.
for streaming services, you've got Amazon Plus, or like Amazon streaming service. You've got Disney Plus. You've got
Netflix, which is the
like,
original.
and then there's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head, but like you've got like a whole lot of different streaming services for TV shows, movies, and films and stuff like that. So obviously there is a demand for it, and obviously there would be a demand for it for games too. It's just like at the end of the day, the main problem is just the limitation of the technology that we have. Really, when you really think about it,
Right, that's the
like-
problem at the end of the day.
like
There is...
there are going to be people who are definitely going to want it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially, like I said, considering the PlayStation's lack of backwards compatibility, this is kind of a way to circumvent that.
Well, that and the fact that
Hey,
with streaming
81.
service, you don't have to have crazy hard drive space to go and store all the games that you want to play.
I'm looking for someone.
Right,
just,
and you
for
don't
the
need to
most
have
part,
crazy
play
physical
them.
space.
I'm
I don't need to have
searching
crazy
for
physical
Jedi.
space for all the discs you're going to be buying.
Yeah.
Me, I'm personally old-fashioned. I still like buying discs, and I will if I can, because, like I said, I'm old-fashioned that way. Yes, this creates a logistical problem in my house. Anyone who's seen it knows. But, you know, I'm old-fashioned that way, and I do try. But, you know, there is going to be that issue of, like, if you're in an apartment, having mountains of discs is not convenient. So having a streaming service would be a lot better, and I think that was actually one of Stadia's original selling points. Like, if you're in a smaller house or in a condominium or sorts, you don't have a lot of space to work with, so you don't have like a room you can devote purely to game storage. So, you know, having a streaming service is a lot more convenient. Just pay a monthly or yearly tithe, and you have all of its games. So, you know, there is that.
Yeah.
But the problem with gaming streaming services is very much an issue that streaming services for movies and films have never had to face because they just don't need to. And it's input times, it's processing speed. Once you're streaming a movie, generally speaking, you can just stream that video until it's done, and a slower load time isn't really a big issue because, what are they going to do? Just wait a few more seconds for the movie to load. Here's the problem. Gaming is a two-way experience. It is not like movies where you passively watch them. Gaming is a two-way interaction. You are seeing something on the screen happening, but you're also interacting with it, changing what's happening on the screen. So you're going to need to constantly monitor those inputs back and forth. And there is the problem that gaming streaming has to deal with that, again, Netflix and their lot really don't have to worry about. Because again, TVs and films in general are a passive experience. So they don't really need to worry about slow loading times for the most part. I mean, sure, they need to make them good, but they don't need to make them instantaneous.
Yeah. It just needs strong enough connection and everything in order to perform the way it needs to.
Any ideas?
Yeah, in general, that's not going to hamper the experience so long as it's good enough to a certain point.
Yep.
Whereas in gaming, as anyone who plays, for example, the competitive scene will tell you,
How'd you know that would work?
like microseconds can be the difference between winning and losing a match and getting a headshot or not. Lag has always been an issue in the games industry, even going back to the days of disc games. And hell, even multiplayer games that run over the air still have issues with lag. So factor in a streaming component where the entire game is hosted digitally, and not just a small port, and not just, you know, a portion of it, and you've got a lot of issues there. So, yeah, there is several issues to work out.
Yeah.
Am I going to say the streaming services will never work? Absolutely not. There is certainly a lot of demand for them, and as Justin has pointed out.
Whoever lived here
I
used
certainly
this
agree
room
with
for
that
storage.
statement.
They kept food and supplies.
But all in all, we'll see how it works. I will continue playing with my thing. Like I said, I have until the end of my subscription, which is at least in the next 200 days, for me to continue using the streaming service, which I will. Like I said, I bought it originally to play Sly Cooper Collection. By the way, if anyone at Sony hears this, I want another Sly Cooper. Thank you.
I want my Goober.
I want to get new game.
Well,
They hinted new game. Where is new game?
Where is my game?
Get moving for now.
I will buy that. I will definitely buy that game if it comes out. But regardless,
Okay, try that.
again, what are you gonna do? But yeah, that's our opinions on streaming services and games in general.
The vault.
Thought we'd do a shorter
that's where I was
episode.
headed too.
My experience as well as our few
Okay.
off-the-cuff
Well,
opinions about how
Just
this
gotta figure out a way out of this place.
kind of new medium is progressing. What do you think, Justin? Any closing thoughts?
Frankly, no matter what, I see this definitely will grow and continue, and there will be definitely a large number of people who are going to want to do streaming services for either one of two reasons. One, to be able to play whatever game they want at any time, or two, to not be limited by the type of storage that they have.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, like I'm definitely gonna see people definitely are gonna continue with this for a good while. And as well, I mean, like literally the ability to have like full proper fiber optic cables and everything in the ground alone is likely gonna make a massive change.
Tight fit. But this should
Definitely.
work.
So
And I mean, this is also better for developers in a way.
yep. More
Considering
people would be able to access games in multiple different platforms.
Oh, not even just the games aspect. You're also thinking about when you make a game, what's involved? Well, there's the obvious coding of the game, which you're never going to have to be able to bypass unless you create games that write themselves, in which case you have a whole other issue.
Yeah.
But you've got to think about case design. You've got to think about art for that case. You've got to think about disc creation. You got to think about shipping those discs or cartridges if you're in Nintendo's space. You've got to think about how long those cartridges are going to take. You got to think about the creation of those cartridges. There's quite a few things you have to think about in terms of logistics and money spending that you just don't have to with streaming. When a streaming game just comes up, you just put it through the channels, game gets finished, put the final product on the streaming service, and that's it.
Yeah.
No more investment required outside of maybe the yearly tithe that the streaming service would demand, or based on how much money you make, or whatever.
Healing stem.
Or maybe they're paying you, who
It's
knows.
full of surprises.
So, you know, it's a lot better for devs
Better.
in that regard,
Thanks, little droid.
but we'll see.
Okay, let's try this
But
again.
yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
I will certainly
Okay.
find it interesting. Like I said, we've
I
already
mean,
had.
Like for me, I'll say it from my personal viewpoint. I don't intend to really be using any streaming services. For the most part, I like the idea of
Never known
being
a forgetful
guaranteed
droid.
to be able to play the game offline.
Can't argue with that.
But
Yeah, there is.
Chest.
at the end of the
Think the Jedi
day,
would mind if we grabbed
it is
supplies?
definitely going to be something people are going to want.
Yeah, there is that actually that you need to touch on. You actually reminded me. There is that part that you really need to touch on. When you have a streaming
That's where we
service,
need
there's
to go.
also an issue of ownership that comes into play here.
Mm.
So, for example, and this is actually something that I actually heard an example of. I think someone I used to listen to, well, still kind of do, who used to work at Inside Gaming, kind of mentioned this. He mentioned that the idea of streaming services is basically this, and let me use an example. So, one of the Harry Potter Lego games that came out, I think it was Harry Potter Lego games. I think it was like The Hobbit. This game came out for Lego. It's not surprising. Lego makes a lot of franchise games that they, make their own spin on. It's a common thing for them.
Yep.
Here's one problem. Lego might not have gotten the licensing all right when they made the game. So some of the things they were using, they couldn't legally use. So the game got yanked from shelves when this came to light, due to the will of Warner Brothers.
Got a scan?
And any remaining copies were destroyed.
You mapped everywhere we've been.
However, here's the problem. There was something of a lag, shall we say, between when this game was found out or when this point was found out and made public and when it had begun selling its copies. So what happened was some copies did indeed get sold. I should know. I have one. And these copies are now the property of whomever bought them. So while the copies that were sold to stores and retailers could all easily be recalled and thrown in the burners, those that were bought and purchased could not, legally and also logistically, because you need to track down where all those copies were sold, where they went, what happened to them, and then there'd also be the legal issues of, well, now technically these people own those games thanks to those retailers. It's
Yeah.
all legal issues to
Like
deal
that
with there.
person spent physical
Tool was
money
used by
on
someone
that
who
item,
reached the
which
vault.
you are wanting to take from them.
So you'd either need to negotiate something that would force them or compel them to sell that copy back to you, or you would need to give them their money back. And that's even if they'd accept that money. There's no guarantee they will. I
Mhm.
know I won't. So, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
So all the copies that are still out there still play, still work, still function as normal. But you can't buy any of those games anymore. At least I believe it's The Hobbit. One of them that I own is. But regardless, this copy of the game, you can't buy anymore. Because, again, the licensing wasn't done right. So that version no longer exists. I think they might have re-released it later, under right licensing, maybe. But the point is, like, there's that whole issue of ownership that comes in there. You own a physical version of the game, which means you cannot have that physical version taken from you because of legal and logistical reasons. When it comes to streaming services, that's not how it works. And this also factors into online games as well. This is also where we can kind of touch on online marketplaces. When you buy a game from Steam or Epic or wherever you prefer to shop, I'm not judging much. But really, in all fairness, in all seriousness, regardless of where you shop, there is an issue of ownership.
Okay.
When you buy from wherever you buy, online that is, you are purchasing a license. A license. Now, this is computer speak in some regard, because this is also something that exists in just regular coding and programs in general, but to summarize, basically a license is the right to use the code or the algorithm or the piece of tech
software that which you have.
The software. That's the word. Thank you. It is the right to use the software. That is what you're purchasing. So that is why, and this actually happened, I believe it was Slime Rancher that had this. Slime Rancher originally did their pre-orders back when that first came out on Steam, and it was actually originally a crowdfunding project, I believe. At least I think it was Slime Rancher.
I think it was Slime Rancher. Yeah, because Slime Rancher had this that type of thing going on.
So anyways, they originally crowdfunded on GoFundMe, and everyone that they funded and was put enough cash was promised a key to the game, the license, on Steam when the game first came out. Now, here's the long and short of the story. That kind of ended up happening, but kind of didn't. What happened was Epic came into the picture back when they were still a new game marketplace, and kind of still are, but I digress. And Epic, in typical Epic fashion, basically bought up Slime Rancher through a back deal negotiation and said, "Hey, we'll give you all."
I don't think that this is Slime Rancher then, because I'm pretty sure Slime Rancher is still like owned by this separate company and not.
Oh no, they're owned by the separate company. I admit my wording's a bit deceptive.
Okay.
Here, let me rephrase it a bit. Through a back deal, they basically said, "Hey, we'll give you all the money you want. Come to our platform and forget Steam." They agreed. So, here's the problem. If they're not doing on Steam anymore, what happened to all those Steam keys they promised their funders when the game first came out? Well, they didn't get them. At least at first. Let me explain what happened in the aftermath. At first, there was no Steam keys. People got angrier and furious. And eventually, through some negotiation, they did fulfill their promise because they did promise Steam keys to their funders. And so a version of that game does exist on Steam for those only specific few who funded the game. But if you ever want to buy Slime Rancher nowadays, you're not going to find it on Steam. You're going to have to go over to Epic.
No,
or at least, or was it an exclusivity contract?
Yeah,
I think it was
I think it was an exclusivity contract for a short period of time, but no, you can get Slime Rancher on Steam.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was an exclusivity contract or a straight...
I think for a short period of time, it was an exclusivity contract, and then it was fully on Steam. Because I know it's been fully on Steam for a good while now.
Okay. So it might not have been... Oh, well, you get the point of the game. You get the point I'm trying to reference here. Basically, through the whole course of events, eventually people did get their keys, but only for the people who funded the game. And for a while, it was only available on Epic. It did, as Justin pointed out, eventually come over to Steam. At least I believe it. Like I said, it was Slime Rancher. I might be thinking of a different game, but I do know this story happened.
Yeah, like it might be a different game because right now Slime Rancher has like its main game, and now it's got a secondary game that's working on.
Yeah, I think it's Slime Rancher 2. I think that's actually already out.
Yeah.
But regardless, you get the point. There is the whole issue of licensing that comes into the thing here. You pay for a license, you are owed that license. If the game gets taken off the platform, the game itself is no longer available for purchase, but if you still have the license, you might still be owed the game. And even then, if the game gets taken off the service, well, if
you paid for it specifically, then it's a very complicated thing when it comes to the fact that you do own it. You did pay for it in a way, so
you do have the right to own the license.
yeah, you
now,
do
there
have
are
a right
some...
to use, at the very least, to use it in some capacity.
Now, like I said, there can be some issues in the case of, let's go back to that Hobbit example.
See something in there?
If there is some licensing issues for that, those licenses might be dubbed null and void unless you have a physical version you downloaded to a hard drive somewhere on your, on your thing. And that does happen. Some people do actually download all their files from their Steam downloads onto a hard drive. I know my buddy does it because his game space is just that limited. So he just runs it from a hard drive from a cable instead of the hard drive on his computer when he's playing that game. He has like hard drives for specific big games.
It's difficult, Master.
Yes, the path
But
is
here's the thing.
may seem
You have the license in that
but with
case, in a
persistence
way, to do that.
and
So long as you're not
force,
modifying the
you will
game,
overcome
you're fine.
any obstacle.
Yep.
You will master any path,
So
But-
don't modify.
which you must to reach.
Even then. But when you have something like a streaming service, here's the thing. You don't own anything. There is no ownership in a streaming service. What you are buying in a streaming service is the accessible right to use that streaming service. So if they yank a game from that store you like, there is nothing you can argue to them that will legally hold up because you have no right to the game to begin with, at least that one specific game. Now, if the streaming service were to go under, that's a whole other story. They might have to negotiate money back and yada yada yada. And again, it will depend on the case-by-case basis, I'd imagine. But overall, when it comes to game per game, like specific games, if they yank a game you like, there's really nothing you can say. Because you own nothing of that game. You own a right to access the streaming service, but you do not own the right to the games on that streaming service.
Think you
That's
can
the
show me that
company
shortcut again?
themselves. So, again, there is an issue of ownership that kind of comes up with streaming services.
Yeah.
But again, that's kind of the whole process of digitization in a way. You're paying for convenience while simultaneously paying with ownership. That's kind of the issue with streaming services no one talks about. You're kind of foregoing the...
You're losing the ability to actually own the game. So at any point, the company could just say, "Oh no, you don't own this anymore. We don't allow you to use it," and that money that you spent into it is just gone.
Yeah.
So
that's the whole thing, right? Like I said, when it comes to physical games, that's why games from like the old, N64 are still kicking around. In fact, me and a buddy saw that at a convention a few weeks back, because those games are physically owned by someone and they can get traded around the open marketplace. But when it comes to licenses, unless you have a physical copy downloaded somewhere, well, if they yank that game, there's a bit of an issue there. They have to refund people, there's a bit of a process there. But when it comes to streaming services, if they yank that game, there is nothing they have to do. They don't even have to notify you. They can just be like, yep, it's gone.
yep, no, you're not allowed to have it anymore. Goodbye.
Pretty much. So again, there is that issue with ownership you have to consider with streaming services as well. So,
Yeah.
use at your own discretion, I suppose. Which again is why I always buy all my games physically. Number one, because I like to have physical copies, because I'm old-fashioned that way. But number two, because, I like the actual idea of owning that game. It means that if that game were to go under, or if some issue were to happen, I could still play that game. Now, there's the whole problem with day one patches coming out, and but that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, all in all, thought that was a point worth bringing up on the side as well. Sorry to drag it along a bit. I know we promised a shorter episode. Still relatively short by comparison, but I thought the issue of privacy, or not privacy, ownership, was one to
at least mention, because it is something worth mentioning.
Honestly, the whole process of the whole level of ownership thing that comes with these services is often a point people do not talk about. either because of willing ignorance or just because of not knowing it.
Yeah.
So it's always something worth mentioning when discussing these types of things.
'Cause it
But
is important in a way.
Mm-hmm. But anyways, so yeah, that's the discussion. That's our video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, any closing thoughts on the matter, Justin? You've been relatively quiet.
Not really. Like it is. I don't really have much of a stake in it all in general, because I'm still gonna stick with the whole. I'm not really too interested in playing it, so. Yeah. But yeah, no. At the end of the day, I do stand by the point of it is something people definitely do want. It's just there's a few setbacks to it all,
Tracy there?
and one of the things that you kind of have to make sure you watch out for is that when you do it this way, you're not really owning the game, so you have to keep that in mind at the end of it all.
Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the video. Happy New Year, guys. Happy holidays in general. Hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. I know I did. Justin sounds like he's dying in the corner.
Just a bit.
But yeah, hope you guys have a wonderful holidays. Hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas. Oh, you all had Christmas originally.
But
already.
hopefully it was good for you.
Hopefully it was good. Hope you all had a wonderful hope you all have a wonderful New Year. Confusing my time here. And yeah, so that'll be it. Again, happy holidays, guys. Hope you all have a wonderful New Year, and I guess we'll see you in the new year, because that'll be when our next video is.
Yes.
End of 2022. How'd you think it went, Justin?
Uneventful. Terrible. Cringe.
We'll just put that on the tombstone of 2022. Uneventful, terrible, cringe. Just the 3 words.
Far too easy. Cringe.
Far too easy. Cringe-worthy, in fact.
Yes.
But, so yeah. There you go, guys.
Hopefully
Hope you all have a good one.
we'll be seeing you in the next week for the next year, and yeah.
Like, comment, subscribe. You know the usual.
Yes.
Let's
Stay
get
tuned
to...
Let's get to 20.
Yeah, let's get to 20 by the end of the year, guys. We can do it. I'm sure we can.
We have the technology. We can do it.
We have the technology. So
We have technology. Throws video at subscriber.
We have the technology. Just starts pelting them with videos. Anyways.
Yes.
Anyone who gets that reference, congratulations.
Yes.
But
Alright.
anyways.
Hopefully you all enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yep. See you all in the new year, guys. Bye.